The last speaker of the day is a dear colleague and a friend of mine who invited himself, and I didn't realize that he wasn't a girl. So Allison Bales, Dr. Bales, is the primary moving force behind Energy Vanguard, and he's one of the few physicists that I know that has a sense of humor and does practical stuff. So please give a round of applause to Allison Bales.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. It is so good to be back at summer camp. Oh my God. 2 years off. Thank you, Joe and Betsy, for making it happen again this year. And thank you to Lou and Bill and Michael and Sam and all the other people who helped make the room the safest, most COVID-safe conference that Bill Bonfleth knows of, that he's been to. So this is really exciting to be here, and I'm here talking about a great topic, the Corsi-Rosenthal box, the box fan air cleaner, the high MERV box fan air cleaner, and I'm going to tape one together for you while we're doing this presentation today. And talking about some other stuff as well, but last night I got warned not to be too morbid today, because 5 years ago when I spoke, I guess I was a little bit too morbid for people. I talked about death and abuse, and it was just too much for people. So I'm not going to get into morbidity, not going to get into comorbidities either. So I can't tell you about all the fingers that have been lost in the Corsi-Rosenthal box. Because no fingers have been lost in a Corsi-Rosenthal box. Not a single one. Because every time somebody gets their finger chopped off in one, it gets captured in the box. It's right there. It's not lost at all. That's why another name for these is let's see. No, not the Comparator cube. Hang on. Oh, I don't have my presenter notes here. The Clean Air Finger Catching Apparatus, or Kafka. All right, so I said I'm not going to be morbid. I'm going to make this a nice, pleasant presentation. So let's start with a picture of a monkey hugging a bird. And today is Show Your Pets Day, so here's my pet monkey. Actually, it's not my pet monkey. So let's get into it, and maybe some of you don't know who I am. So Joe mentioned I'm the founder, chief troublemaker at Energy Vanguard. I also in the past have tamed wild duck blasters. I write the Energy Vanguard blog. A bunch of those articles go to Green Building Advisor. And I have a book coming out this fall, yay, after 2.5 years. That's my pandemic project. I also have been wearing masks since long before COVID started. Some of you may look at that and think, oh, well, he should be wearing a respirator, not a mask in that situation. Well, yeah, men don't always do the things they should do, right? And that's the other thing you may be wondering about. Well, isn't Allison a woman? A lot of people have that impression, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that, because I am in Who's Who of American Women, the Millennium Edition. Really, if you find a copy of this, you'll see me in there. So let's move on. Let's get into the meat of the subject here, and we'll start with a little bit of math.
There's an error in the fourth line.
Of course, Mark found it. This is actually, I'm not going to go through all of this with you. I expect by now you've got it all figured out, as Mark has. But let's get into the what of the Corsi-Rosenthal box, the high MERV box fan air cleaner, and talk about this. So as Bill mentioned this morning, the idea of matching a filter and a box fan has been around for a long time. Usually it's just one filter on the back of a box fan and used for wildfire and other situations. Workshops, it's great for workshops. And in September of 2020, so about half a year into the pandemic, I saw this tweet. John Simmelhack, who is somewhere in here, in the back. John Simmelhack posted this tweet, and I saw that and was fascinated. He basically reposted something that Neil Comparetto posted on Facebook with a box fan and 4 MERV 13 filters. And you can use that to filter the air and help prevent the spread of COVID. So I made one. This was my first one that I made, and it's 4 filters and a box fan. Costs less than $100. Works great. I run it on low. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Here is an official Corsi-Rosenthal box, which has 5 filters. So instead of a piece of cardboard on the bottom, so that it can rest on the floor, this one has 5 filters. Oop. And you have to put it on feet so that you have space underneath for that 5th filter to be used. Because if you have 5 filters and you just set it on the floor, well, you wasted your money on that 5th filter.
Tip it over periodically.
Well, you could rotate the...
It's like your underwear where you get something.
Yeah, okay. Mark says it's like your underwear where you turn it inside out and you get another week out of it. Yeah. Okay. So the Corsi-Rosenthal box is named for these 2 guys. Richard Corsi, who is an engineer and I think the dean at the University of California, Davis. Jim Rosenthal, who owns a filter company. And they came up with the idea, I guess a couple of years ago, early in the pandemic, of going from 1 filter to 5 filters. And Jim Rosenthal has been a tireless promoter of this. He's done research on it. He's published a lot of articles in his blog. He has been really great at getting the word out about this. And they even have a Wikipedia page now. And it talks about the Corsi-Rosenthal box. The 4-filter version is sometimes called the Comparetto cube. That's with John Simmelhack's partner in Virginia. But it's all part of the same thing. Oops. One of the things that's happened is there has been a tremendous amount of creativity and research going on with these. Jim Rosenthal posted some pictures of some small versions of these box fan air cleaners that he did. One of those is 8 inches, an 8-inch fan, one's a 9-inch fan with different filters, and they work fine too. If you don't have the space for the full size box fan, a 20-inch box fan, you can do it with smaller fans.
Desktop model.
What?
Desktop model.
Desktop model. So here is another advance that came along, and what you see here on the corners is some cardboard covering the open spaces on the corners. Because if you leave the box fan open, you got a square box fan, you got round blades, you get some bypass. So some of the air comes in through the top and then gets pushed back out. So not all of the air coming out the top, in that case, will be filtered air. So if you put the shroud on or you cover the corners some other way, then more of the air coming out, well, ideally all of the air coming out will be filtered air. It will all have gone through the filters on its way to coming out the top. Here's another version of the box fan air cleaner. This is with 2 filters, and you can use different sizes on this. You can have 20-inch in one dimension. Most of the box fan air cleaners I've seen use 20 by 20 filters, but you could do 20 by 24 filters, and so it'd be a little bit taller. You get more filter area, lower pressure drop, so you get a higher airflow and higher clean air delivery rate. And creativity. So a much better mask than the KN95 or the N95 here. And since these things have gotten into school, kids like to decorate them. There's all kinds of stuff out there. This is really taken off. So here's our little robot Corsi-Rosenthal box. It's gotten lots of publicity, and schools have gotten involved, and classes make them as projects. People get together and make roomfuls of them to distribute to schools and different places. Some of the stuff that I'm showing here is stuff that Joe Meadows shared with me. Joe's done a lot of work in this as well. And some of you are probably still thinking about, well, is he really in Who's Who of American Women? And the answer is yes, I am. But I'm also, notice, I've also been selected as a Woman of Outstanding Leadership by the International Women's Leadership Association. So, am I a man?
I think we should have a scrotum check.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not do that. I'm not going to repeat what Mark said about how I should have a scrotum check. So let's get into the why now. Why do this? And Bill Bonfleth did a great job covering this morning. Well, this started with the whole COVID-19 pandemic starting. And so this is a different image of the coronavirus that you don't usually see. Everybody shows the same one with the red pieces sticking out. These little blue pieces are the coronavirus. And it's been a big part of our lives for the last 2.5 years. And one of the things that we have discovered, scientists have discovered, and Bill talked about this very well this morning, COVID is airborne. We've got case studies and modeling and all kinds of other documentation that COVID spreads through the air. It's not what we thought early on. It's not the surfaces that are contaminated and we touch them. And remember early on, some people were going to the grocery store and then disinfecting all their groceries as soon as they got home. And plexiglass everywhere. And we had all this hygiene theater. So it wasn't the surfaces. It's not the droplets so much. Yes, if you're standing right in front of somebody and talking, droplets could be an issue. But in a room where you're 20 feet away from somebody, in a poorly ventilated room, like some of the restaurant cases where one infected person with the air currents blowing towards other people infects 3 other people in the room, some of them farther away, we know COVID is airborne. The Choir case in Washington State as well. So we've got all kinds of evidence that COVID is airborne, and that means that all we got to know is the carbon dioxide level and we're good, right? No, I have one of these too. Bill showed his this morning. I carry mine with me, and I had the same experience with the car yesterday. I had it in my pocket. I didn't look at it while I was in the car, but on the airplane we got up to about 1,700 parts per million, I think. In the car we got up to 4,400 parts per million. Wow, that's like what astronauts have to deal with. By the way, astronauts deal with much higher carbon dioxide levels than we do because keeping the air fresh inside a spaceship or space station is a lot of expense and effort, so they run it at higher carbon dioxide levels. So anyway, we know that carbon dioxide is good. It tells us something. It tells us how much ventilation we have or don't have. It tells us how much the air is being replaced. It gives us an idea of how much air we are rebreathing that has already been breathed. And David Elfstrom, another guy who's done a bunch of really good research and publicity, publicizing the Corsi-Rosenthal box, put together a spreadsheet showing the carbon dioxide level correlated to how much air you're breathing. And I can't remember the numbers. I think 2,000 parts per million is like 4% or 5%. 5% of the air that you're breathing in has already been in somebody else's lungs at least once. And Bill mentioned this morning John Shaw Billings, who's got a great quote in his book, Ventilation and Heating, about wearing other people's underwear. I mean, nobody would ever put on somebody else's underwear, but we all the time take in air into our lungs that other people have breathed, and we don't think about that. So Carbon dioxide levels tell us something about the ventilation rate and how much other people's air we might be rebreathing. It doesn't tell us how much SARS-CoV-2 we might be breathing in or other contaminants, because there are different kinds of contaminants. This is a particle meter. So if we want to get a better idea, we look at the CO2 and how much particulate there is in the air. This measures PM 2.5 and PM 10. Because particulates can be filtered out. And the particles that have COVID on them, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, are particles. Particles can be filtered out. We can get rid of that stuff by good filtration. As Bill said this morning, we want to do everything. We want to do a layered approach and have a good idea of what our equivalent ventilation rate is, our equivalent ACH. So we can do filtration, but not everybody can do filtration in their HVAC systems with high MERV filters. This is my house. I have got 3 16 by 25 MERV 13 filters that operate at a very low pressure drop. And I've got a variable capacity system that's constantly running, and it ramps up and down, so I have pretty good filtration in my house just from that. You can also buy these portable HEPA cleaners. This is one from Santa Fe. It has also UV built into it. These things are more expensive. They work well, but you need more of them to match the clean air delivery rate of a Corsi-Rosenthal box. So, and the other thing is, the filtration that we're doing is not just good for preventing COVID. There's all kinds of indoor air pollutants that we deal with. So there's particulate matter and secondhand smoke and nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, ozone, volatile organic compounds, mold, allergens, bioeffluents, radon, viruses. And that's not everything, but that's a bunch of the stuff that you'll see in indoor air. Not all of that can be filtered out. This is the stuff of that list that can be filtered out. The particles, the secondhand smoke, the mold allergens, some of the bioeffluents, not carbon dioxide obviously, because that's a gas. We can filter out particles, not gases, with the standard media filters. You can filter out gases with some types of filters, but not these standard media air cleaners. So ventilation helps us dilute the gases, the VOCs and things like that. Filtration helps us get rid of anything that's in particulate form. And here's a great diagram from the EPA showing the scale of particulate matter. This is the MERV scale. And as Bill said this morning, MERV 13 is where you want to be. That seems to be the number that makes people most uncomfortable. And so we chose it, and it's also the one that is the most cost effective. You get a really good level of filtration with a pressure drop that you can manage in HVAC systems. What? Oh. If you do a search on the name Allison, this is what you get. There's one guy up there, look at that. His last name is Allison. Why is my name Allison, anyway? Oh yeah, I'm the third. My father was Allison. My grandfather was Allison. Or were they? Let's talk about the how now. Brown cow. Okay, here's the start of my first Corsi-Rosenthal box, a box fan and 4 filters. I've got the filters sort of taped together there already a little bit. And here is Luke Bertram, one of my guys at Energy Vanguard, taping together the one that we made in the office while wearing a mask. This was before the vaccine came out. And what's next here? Oh yeah. So let me pull this out, and we'll start taping one together. Oh no, there's a whole manual I'm supposed to read. I forget. Oh. Lou, what's the TLDR on this? I'm going to ignore that. I'm a man. I'm not reading the damn manual. All right. feet. Look at that. We don't need no stinking feet. How do we take these off? Yeah, oh well. Okay, so we got 4 filters here. So, what you do, we got 4 filters, and we just start buttoning them together. Now, with the first thing you have to do, and I've got the slide in the wrong order, I've got a slide that says you have to pay attention to the arrows. On the side, there's an arrow. This one is pointing down in case you can't see it. That one's pointing down too. Look at that. I got 2 filters that both match. They're both pointing down. I hope they sent them all that way. All right. So the way we typically do this now, because there are 2 modes for this fan. You can have the fan blowing down, or you can have the fan blowing up, sitting on top of the filters. And we actually made one that blows down. That's not, you can do that. You will get lower airflow, because when you blow into the box, you're going to get a lot more turbulence, and that will reduce the airflow. So generally, you want to have the fan facing up. And with the fan facing up, the air is going to come into the filters from the sides. So we want, if the arrow is pointing down here, and I put this like this, so the arrow is pointing that way, this would be on the back side. And if this arrow is pointing that way, I'm going to put it over here. Oh.
There you go.
Yes. I knew they would send wrong. Yes, you're right. I should have read the manual. That's it. Oh man. Okay. So we're going to put it together, and with the first joint, it doesn't matter whether we do it like this or like this, right? We're just going to tape them together. So I'll pull a little piece of tape off. So when I've done this, I just take a little piece of tape first, tape them together. Flip it over. And tape that right there. Yeah, I know. Hurry up, we want beer. This will go fast. Now, I was thinking about cutting the cardboard for you too, because we got to cut a cardboard for the bottom and also for the shroud. And I was going to cut the cardboard for you, but then I figured, well, you know what, these guys are at Building Science Summer Camp. They probably know how to cut cardboard already. And if you don't, see Joe later on. We can do a cardboard cutting lesson in his backyard.
Several people suggested I come help do it.
Oh, good. Yeah. So we're going to, Joe Menosh is going to help cut. Arrow pointing down here, so we want that pointing in. Now here we have a choice. We can do it like this, or we can do it like this. And we want to do it like this if we want to end up with a square. Here, I'll let you tape that and I'll explain this part. Thanks, Joe. All right. It was on that sheet, or the slide earlier. Yep, it's in there. Okay, so the second filter goes like that. The third filter, we want to butt up this way. And, I mean, we have a choice. I'm sorry, we don't want to do it that way. We don't want to do it that way. We want to do it this way. So it ends up like that. And then the fourth one goes like that. And when you do it this way, you end up with a square that's 22 inches by 22 inches. If you do it the other way, you end up with a rectangle that's 20 by 24. Now, that's not a big deal. You can still make a Corsi-Rosenthal box with a 20 by 24 rectangle of filters, and you'll just have to do a little bit of extra taping probably, but a square is nicer. Duct tape and WD-40 can fix anything.
Only if you have vice grip.
Only if you have vice grips? Oh. Okay. So pay attention to the arrows. Joe's taping this together. Let's see, where's the tape? I can help with some of that.
Keep going.
Okay. All right. So Joe's taping this together, and then we have the cardboard in here. Okay. Once we get the four taped together,
Where'd you get the cardboard from?
this cardboard, you probably can tell, came from the store.
No, wait, what, really? Oh, because it comes with a box. The fan comes with a box.
The box fan comes in a box. That's why they call it a box fan. Everybody knows that. It comes in a box. So you cut the box, and you make one solid piece for the bottom, a piece with a hole in it for the top. That's the shroud to keep the bypass from going in the corners. And we're gonna, after we get the filters all taped together, then we put the bottom on, then we put the fan on, and then the shroud on, and it's done. And then we plug it in. 14-inch opening, Joe says, for the 20-inch box fan. And yeah, as long as you cover the corners, it doesn't have to be exact. This is not exact science. So here's a... This is my den at home. This, on the first slide you saw this. So we've got the Corsi-Rosenthal box in the middle, and my mother-in-law and my wife sitting there with the Corsi-Rosenthal box between them. And Bernie came and joined us after the inauguration. Thanks to David Elfstrom.
The temperature's raising relative humidity.
So, when you put these things in a room, you want to think about the airflow. Remember, it's when you have the fan blowing the air out the top, it's pulling air in the sides. So putting the Corsi-Rosenthal box in the middle of a group of people is the best place to put it. You're blowing air up towards the ceiling, you're pulling air in from the sides. If you put it in any way that might blow air from one person across to other people, the air coming out of the fan is clean, but if somebody is infected and they're breathing out particles with viral load, then that could spread infection in the room, even though the air coming out of the box is clean. So think about how you place these things. Now Bernie's sitting in a little bit of the wrong place. He should be sitting on the sofa, but he had a folding chair and he wanted to use it. I don't know. All right. Air changes per hour. And equivalent air changes per hour, as we learned this morning, are important. So the fan blows at a certain rate. And it blows at one rate when there's nothing attached to it. If you just have the fan with no filters on it, it blows at another rate. If you put one filter on it, or another, if you put different configurations of 4 or 5 filters. This is a photo that John Simmelhack did. So this apparatus that you see here, John Simmelhack made with help from Steve Rogers. What they did is they put the Corsi-Rosenthal box on one end, a duct blaster on the other, and they used this tube of cardboard boxes to reduce the turbulence coming out of the fan so that they could get a better measurement of the airflow. And here's what they found. On the far left is open fan, and the different colors are low, medium, and high speed. With open fan, you're over 1,000 CFM on low. With the 4-filter version, the Comparetto Cube form of the Corsi-Rosenthal box, we're at 570, or they measured 575. Now, this version that we have here, Michael Brown and Sam Kenny measured the other day at about 500 CFM on high speed. So that could be one of two things. It could be the way they did the measurement. It could also be that this fan is not as powerful, and we think that it's the fan. They did a different kind of measurement, but you have to look at the fan, because different box fans give you different airflow rates. So this is probably the fan, 500 CFM on high speed in the 4-filter version. And you can see they did a bunch of other things with one filter, I think, and what did they do? A 4-inch filter, a 2-inch filter, a 1-inch filter, different kinds, and they got lower airflow. The 4-filter version is much better than the 1-filter version, no matter how thick. With the 2-inch thick, we have 2-inch thick filters here. The 4-filter version of that gives you much better airflow than the 4-inch thick 1-filter version. So go with more filters when possible. Now, we are almost done here. The airflow rate is not really the important variable. Because if we were just interested in the airflow coming out of here, we'd take all the filters off. Because look, we get more airflow with no filters on there. If we want high airflow, just take the filters off. But it's not the airflow rate. It's the clean airflow rate. So we need the clean air delivery rate, the CADR that Bill talked about this morning. And that is the airflow rate that John Semmelhack measured and Sam and Michael measured on these, times the filter efficiency. So for example, if we have 500 CFM of airflow coming out of the 4-filter version of this, and we've got a MERV 13 filter on there. MERV 13 filter is 85% efficient at the 1 to 3 micron particle size range. So 85%, 0.85 times 500 gives us 425 CFM. So the clean air delivery rate for that particle size range with MERV 13 filters would be 425 CFM with a measured airflow rate of 500 CFM. If your measured airflow rate is 575 CFM, then your clean air delivery rate is 575 times 0.85. That makes sense? Here is this, Bill showed the same graph this morning. This is from that paper that Corsi was on, looking at the effectiveness of these DIY box fan air cleaners. And on the left, you see the airflow rates for the Corsi-Rosenthal box. On the right, the two in blue are standalone HEPA air cleaners that you can buy. The clean air delivery, there's a bunch of information on this graph, but just look at the height of the columns. The purple, orange, and yellow columns are much higher than the blue columns, and the height of the columns is the clean air delivery rate. So we've got much better clean air delivery rate for the Corsi-Rosenthal box than we do for these commercial HEPA air cleaners. Wow, for less than $100. Oh, and I was going to say one other thing. So that example I just went through, 500 CFM of airflow and 85% efficient gets you 425 CFM of clean air delivery rate. In this graph, on low speed, they're getting 600 CFM clean air delivery rate. Now they did it a different way. They put tiny salt particles into the air and measured the actual change in concentration. But they got 600 CFM. So you get really high clean air delivery rates for low cost. Here's a question that comes up sometimes. Every time I've written about it, or talked about it, somebody will say, well, these things will catch on fire because the motor in that fan is going to overheat with the extra pressure from those filters. And I keep saying this, but Bill talked about this morning too. There's a page on the EPA's website that addresses this issue. They've done research on this, and here's what they found. Here's a statement from their page there, and at the bottom it says, none of the scenarios tested pose any observable fire hazards. The motors do not get anywhere near hot enough to start a fire. But they are good at filtering out the wildfire smoke that gets into houses and cleaning up the air. So the answer to that, will they catch on fire? No, they're not going to burn your house down. Another question that comes up, well, isn't the virus too small? This thing won't catch all the viral particles because the virus is like less than 1/10 of a micron. And you're talking about, with the 85% you're talking about is for 1 to 3 microns, and less than 1/10 of a micron, that's really small. This filter's not going to catch it. Well, Bill addressed this morning too. The filter efficiency, yes, it is a little bit lower at 1/10 of a micron, but it is still filtering out particles that small. And here's the other thing. There are very few individual viral particles floating around by themselves. They're usually attached to other things, so they are floating around in bigger sizes. It's not just a 1/10 of a micron particle floating around. They're 1 micron and bigger a lot of times. And these filters work great on that. So, no, the answer is the viral particles are not too small. The other thing is, does it work? Here's a paper. This is actually the lead to that paper that graph came from. This is the Corsi paper, and you can read this paper. They talk about the research they did with the salt particles in the air and how they got the clean air delivery rate and everything, and they find these things to be really effective. Here's some anecdotal evidence. Jeffrey, where's Jeffrey? Right over here. Jeffrey Sauls, my right-hand man at Energy Vanguard, got COVID. He was just starting to show symptoms the day that I go over to his house and walked around, and he was showing me his ERV, I think, that day. I did not get it. I am one of the few. How many of you here have not gotten COVID yet? Wow, yay. That's good.
For sure.
Well, how many of you have never tested positive for COVID and didn't have any symptoms that you think? Yeah. Good. I'm in that small group too. This is a bigger group than I thought it would be.
Building science is working.
Okay, so Jeffrey got COVID in December, right? I think it was. And he lives in a small house, so he wasn't able to completely go to another part of the house or another place and just stay there by himself. He wore a mask the whole time, and they kept the Corsi-Rosenthal box between him and his son and his wife whenever they were out in the same room together. His son didn't get COVID, and his wife didn't get COVID. So, I mean, that's anecdotal evidence, but that has worked. Now, I didn't get the memo till late, but apparently today is show your pets in your presentation day. So here's my cat, Lulu, also known as Blaze or Kitty Boo or many other things. And I've got an equivalent, I've got a Stephanie Taylor equivalent pet rate as well. She has 6 dogs. I've got 6 cats. Look at that. All right. So thanks to. Yes.
You just repeat what I said loud. Is that if you're gonna when you're done and you decide to get rid of this, do it outside with a real mask on and put it in a trash can and throw it away, because you decided to grab all of these particulates, and then you get in here and you start cutting things across, and you're going to rebreathe everything you just did. So be smart about how you dispose of it, which is never part of any of the stuff about this.
What do you do with the finger?
He said, what do you do with the fingers? You fish them out as soon as they fall in there so you can go to the doctor and get them sewn back on.
Yeah, about a year, depending on your culture, so 6 months is a safe time to do it, but...
Repeat the question each time, guys.
Yep. How long do they last? Sorry.
6 months minimum. You can get a year out of a good, well, depends how thick the filter is. 2 inch will get you longer, 4 inch will get you even longer.
Yeah, I think my first one lasted 6 months or so.
How much cat hair can it have? How many cat hair have to clog the filter?
But it also can just capture...
6. You got to have 6.
Very personal lifestyle.
So,
Before we get to questions, hang on. I'm not quite done yet. Almost there. So I want to thank John Semmelhack for first turning me on to this, and Lou Harriman, Joe Medosh, Bill Bonfleth. Here's my name and contact info. Here, my book. There's the cover of my book. It is about to go to the printer. They're finishing up the index now. It's going to the printer next week, I hope, and it'll be out in October. Yes? Give this away?
Yeah, somebody's driving.
Guys, questions?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, question.
So while anything's better than nothing, can we rely on these to be actually MERV 13? I mean, is there quality control on
Good
that?
question. So the question, well, you heard the question. Can we rely on it to be MERV 13?
No.
I mean, like everything, it depends, right? That's the number one answer. Like the clean air delivery rate depends. It depends on, what your actual airflow is, and it depends on what efficiency you're talking about. You're talking about 1 to 3 micron particles, you're talking about 3 to 10, you're talking about the 0.1 to 1. So
not all manufacturers are testing their filters, right? So the reason one guy's name is Rosenthal, because he actually sells filters. And he tests whatever he sells. And they're a little more money, but if you want to get a real MERV 13, you go to Tex Air and you buy a real MERV 13.
the other thing is, MERV 13 filters may be MERV 13 at first, but most of the MERV 13 filters, unless it's a MERV 13A, has part of its effectiveness from an electrostatic charge, which dissipates over time. And as that electrostatic charge dissipates, as the filter loads, you get less effectiveness from it. So you're getting less than MERV 13 over the life of the filter.
So if the virus particles are mainly captured in moisture droplets that we exhale, and they get trapped because they're large enough, because they're suspended in those moisture particles, what happens when the moisture dries out in the filter? Is it still capturing the virus, or is it just spreading it?
Well, I'm not a virus expert, maybe Bill can answer that, but the virus doesn't last all that long. I mean, it will stick around for a few days, I think, and then it's deactivated.
The thing is, the respiratory droplets desiccate to what they call droplet residues almost immediately. So they're essentially solid particles. The final size depends somewhat on the humidity, which was something Stephanie was talking about. So they're particles and they get caught and they don't come out.
They don't come out.
And even when the expired droplets shrink all the way down, when it loses most of the water, it's still got protein and mucin and the salts that are in your saliva and mucus, so they never get down to nothing.
Okay.
The other filters are not like clothing where it's woven. It's a chaos part of that. So when stuff gets in there, it doesn't really get out easily.
Okay, so we've got this fan that's blowing air straight up into the room. Has anything been done on some kind of a diffuser or a pinwheel whirlybird to help distribute the air out of this thing better, or am I looking into this too much?
You're probably looking into it too much, but probably somebody has done something like that. I haven't seen it if they have.
Run the air handler fan 10 minutes every hour. I pulled that number out of my butt. I'm not a graduate student, I'm an engineer.
One real quick. Do you have any data on the shroud, how much bypass it prevents?
Jim Rosenthal does.
Okay.
He's got an article on that, and he's done the with and without the shroud and how it affects the airflow. I don't remember the numbers. It's been a while since I looked at that.
Send us an email, we'll send you the article.
Will do.
Has the static pressure been measured inside the fan?
I haven't met. John, do you know? Have you measured it?
Got it.
Lou might have an answer. Hey.
So the answer is it depends on the fan, and it depends on the filters as to what you end up with for negative pressure in there. It varies a lot depending on the fan. These happen to be the fans that I got for this project, which are, I think the technical term is crappy fans. Okay, bought the wrong ones. Should have been the cheaper ones that are louder and have a lot of airflow, which would have been a lot more negative pressure. Depends on the fan.
So the vectors for radon-induced lung cancer are the radon decay products, which are charged particles. So if the MERV 13 filters are electrostatically charged, will they take the particles out of the air?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
So HEPA was developed in the National Lab in the national labs to actually grab particles that had issues from what they were doing with the discovery of radiation. So real HEPA wasn't to do particulates, it was to grab radiation particles from the people breathing it. Okay, so that's the first one. So I'm sure that a real HEPA must have some ability to reduce your exposure to radon type of particles is what you're trying to gather. So there probably is some benefit, not scientific here, but that's actually how HEPA was developed in the national labs.
I'm going to show some filter ignorance here. The cat hair problem's a real thing. So I taped some 1-inch MERV 8s as like a pre-filter. Does that ruin performance in any way? Does it affect?
So you taped a 1-inch on here?
On the outside of it.
Does it ruin? Well, yeah, you're adding more pressure drop by doing that. So you're reducing the airflow rate and the clean air delivery rate.
But you're catching the boulders before they screw up the main filter.
Yeah, we changed the 1-inch, monthly, and
I add 1-inch carbon when we have wildfire smoke. Then just go through those like every 2 weeks.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah, you just have a lower clean air delivery rate, but it still works.
Hello. This may be a stupid question, but is it possible to over-filter air to where the space is too sterile and then your body's like in shock when you meet outside elements?
Absolutely. And you can air seal a house too. You shouldn't air seal a house too tight. A house needs to breathe.
Well, I hear that. The reason I'm saying it is because I've read some stuff on like...
Or does it?
Yeah, no, I hear you. On kids that live on farms and they have lower occurrences of asthma and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering if there is any reality to some level of reasonable exposure to pollutants and if there is any possible benefits to maintaining some degree of exposure.
I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Taylor, who talked about this issue this morning.
Yeah, get a dog. So you're right. There's studies in the Amish communities where they compare kids in Amish families to Huttite families where they both do a lot of farming, but the techniques are really different. And it is true that children who are in the Amish families who roll around basically with the poop from cows and not sheep so much as cows and I think goats
Pigs.
have a lower incidence of asthma and allergies. And they've identified a lipoprotein component of the E. coli cell wall that's responsible, but it's really not airborne exposure that helps these kids. It's stuff that's in the air is generally the harmful stuff. But you're right, let your dog French kiss your kid, but don't breathe in their farts.
Gary Klein is demonstrating.
Oh, look at that.
It's a personal version. It's a personal version of these courses.
You're making a great deal of sense because we can't hear you.
I can hear you. This is a personal version of what you've just been demonstrating.
Oh, well, I showed one of those earlier, too.
Yes, you did.
Over the shoulders.
This one cost more.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to close it, but Gary is one of the nation's foremost experts on water distribution systems, and he's doing a meeting tonight at 5:30 at the Westford Clubhouse on the second floor of the kitchen barn at 5:30. There will be refreshments in the backyard, of course, but might be an opportunity to harass and learn from one of the nation's best. So with that, I'd like to thank you guys are like Julia Child doing filters.
We didn't cut it.
Cut my finger, cut my finger. Dan Aykroyd version.
Yeah, no, there's no blood, no blood.
So
I said no morbidity today.
So Allison, a pleasure. Thank you. So you all are welcome at Betsy and our